What happens when you stop waiting for the worst and decide you are going to fight for your life? In this episode, you will learn why the decision to keep moving forward matters, even when you cannot control the result, how helplessness and active coping can affect healing outcomes, and what the story of one woman with stage 4 cancer can teach us about refusing to surrender to a prognosis. So I recently watched the movie The Edge, starring Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin. And I did not expect a movie about two men being stalked through the Alaskan wilderness by an enormous bear to make me think so deeply about healing and survival. But it did, and I was so inspired by it that I decided I needed to make an episode dedicated to breaking down how lessons we learn from the Edge can translate to how we approach our healing journey. Now, stay with me because I realize that using the example of a Kodiak bear stalking you feels a little bit dramatic, but it's a surprisingly effective metaphor. In the movie, Anthony Hopkins plays Charles Morse, an intelligent and highly observant man who knows an enormous amount about survival in theory, although he has never really had to put that knowledge into practice. After a plane crash leaves Charles and two other men stranded in the wilderness, no one knows where they are. They are in extremely dangerous terrain. Winter's coming and they don't have warm clothes. They have no food, no reliable way to communicate, and no guarantee that rescuers will find them. Charles acknowledges the danger, but he refuses to let uncertainty become a death sentence. He tells the others that people will be looking for them, and even if no one finds them, they will walk out themselves. I love that line because Charles does not know that they're going to walk out. He doesn't know where they're going, how far they will have to travel, or what they will encounter along the way. Regardless, he makes the decision that he will not give up and die. He will do what he can to survive. As the story continues, their situation becomes considerably worse. Things repeatedly go wrong. They suffer injuries, they get lost and walk for days in a complete circle. They fall in the freezing water. They lose their signal flares. It rains. A search plane flies overhead but doesn't see them because they don't have the signal flares. Over and over again, they come up against seemingly impossible odds, and over again, they have to decide to keep trying to find their way out. Eventually, a Kodiak bear begins stalking them. It kills one member of the group and then repeatedly returns for Charles and Bob, who's played by Alec Baldwin. At first, they run and hide. They try to put distance between themselves and the bear, but nothing works. The bear keeps finding them. It seems like it's one step ahead of them the whole time. And eventually, Charles realizes that they cannot spend the rest of their time waiting for the bear to attack again. As long as they continue thinking of themselves only as prey, every decision belongs to the bear. If they want to survive, they have to face and fight the bear. And Bob, by the way, is not on board with this. But Charles has this amazing line where he finally loses his cool with Bob and asks him, "Do you want to lay down and die, Bob?" Charles says, "Well, I don't. I'm not going to die. Not today. I'm going to kill the bear." And then he makes Bob repeat that line, "I'm going to kill the bear." At first, Bob won't say it, and then he can barely say it, and then Charles pushes him to say those words again and again until the sentence begins to sound less like an impossible claim and more like a commitment. The bear is still at large. They are still stranded. They are still hungry, frightened, and tired, and badly outmatched. The words do not change the situation they are in. They change the men who have to face it. Until that moment, they're waiting to be killed. But after that moment, they begin looking for a way to survive. They study the problem, they make a plan, they build a weapon from what they have, they choose the terrain, they prepare to act. And that is the mindset shift I want to talk about today. It's not about pretending that the danger is smaller than it is, and it's not knowing for certain that everything will turn out the way you hope. It's the moment you decide you're not going to surrender your life before the outcome has been decided. To bring this story back into the world of chronic and terminal illness, I wanted to share the story of a woman identified by the pseudonym Glam, whose story, amazingly enough, fits right into this metaphorical situation. This story was shared by the Radical Remission project. In late 2012, at the age of 46, Glam was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer that had already spread to her liver and one of her lungs. Her doctors told her she had approximately 6 months to live. According to Glam, they recommended she not pursue treatment because it would drain the energy she had left without curing such advanced disease. They told her there was nothing she could do to survive and basically not to bother trying. Now, she could have accepted that assessment as the end of the conversation, but instead, Glam asked for another opinion, and then another, and then another. She sought second, third, and fourth opinions until she found doctors who were willing to approach her case differently. In her words, she looked for people who were committed to her cure rather than to her cancer. Then she made her own version of Charles's decision. She decided to fight with all of her energy, soul, knowledge, and faith. That declaration, just like Charles and Bob's, did not make the danger disappear, but it changed what Glam did next. She underwent surgery to remove the primary colon tumor and a metastases from her liver. A second surgery removed the tumor from her lung. Then she began chemotherapy. The treatment was extremely difficult. Glam developed severe gastrointestinal, skin, and mucosal reactions, and her doctors had to reduce doses and change the medication she was receiving. But she, just like Charles Morse, did not respond to every setback by concluding that the effort was hopeless. Instead, she and her medical team adjusted the plan with each setback. At the same time, she began investigating how else she might support her body. She changed her diet, returned to yoga, practiced meditation, strengthened her faith, and exercised in small amounts whenever she had enough energy. She researched food and nutrition and reconsidered what she valued and how she wanted to live. She used everything she believed might help. That's not so different from making a compass out of a needle and a leaf or sharpening a tree limb to spear a bear. She didn't have a lot of options, but she used what she had. By August of 2013, after several months of lifestyle changes and treatments, her PET scan showed no evidence of disease. The Radical Remission Project reported that Glam remained well and thriving in its later update 5 years later. When we hear stories like Glam's, it can sound as though survivors possess complete confidence from the beginning, but many do not. They may initially collapse under the weight of the diagnosis. They may spend days or weeks terrified, numb, angry, or unable to imagine the future. Many of them actually plan their funerals and make arrangements for their death. So, the decision to live does not require you to feel fearless. It simply may be knowing, I don't know how this is going to end, but I'm not going to give up. Because the point is that you don't have to know that you will live in order to begin choosing life. Choosing life means remaining willing to look for a path. It means asking another question, making another phone call, doing the research, accepting help, eating when your body needs nourishment, resting when it needs strength, and continuing to participate in the decisions that affect you from day to day. Now, no conversation about fighting or survival should ever become another way to blame people who die. Not everyone who makes the decision to live survives. And death does not prove that someone surrendered, lacked faith, failed to remain positive, or did not fight hard enough. You should never feel pressured to force optimism or maintain a fearless attitude every day. You're allowed to be devastated, you're allowed to cry, feel angry, become discouraged, and admit that you were frightened. All of those things probably happened for Glam, and we know they happened in the Edge. The mindset I'm describing is not a permanent emotional state, it's a direction. To understand why this direction matters, it helps to understand something psychologists call learned helplessness. Learned helplessness can develop when someone repeatedly experiences situations in which nothing they do seems to change the outcome. Eventually, the brain begins drawing a conclusion that my actions do not matter. And once that belief becomes established, a person may stop looking for a way out, even when new possibilities appear. Serious illness can create the perfect conditions for learned helplessness. A diagnosis arrives without warning, symptoms change how your body functions and feels, treatments may fail, doctors may tell you there's nothing else to try, insurance may deny something you need. You may follow every instruction and still receive a disappointing scan or laboratory result. And after enough experiences like this, it becomes understandable to think, what is the point of trying? And helplessness is not always created by disappointment alone. It's often deepened by shame. In The Edge, Charles said something that really struck me. Most people who die in the woods die of shame. At first, that sounds weird. Surely people die in the wilderness from cold, dehydration, injury, starvation, or exposure. But Charles is talking about what can happen mentally before the body reaches that point. Someone gets lost, travels in the wrong direction, loses an important piece of equipment, or makes a decision that worsens the situation. And instead of using their remaining energy to solve the problem, they become consumed by the thought that they made the mistake that caused it. The mistake stops being something that happened and becomes evidence of who they believe they are. They no longer think, I made some poor decisions. They begin thinking, I'm incapable, I'm weak, I've ruined everything, I can't get myself out of this. And that's where shame and helplessness begin feeding each other. Shame says, this happened because there's something wrong with me. And helplessness says, and because something is wrong with me, nothing I do now will make a difference. So the person stops searching for water, building shelters, signaling for help, or looking for a route out. Their mind resigns before their body has reached the end of what it can endure. And that idea has enormous relevance after a serious diagnosis because people often carry shame about becoming ill. They wonder whether they should have eaten differently, managed their stress better, noticed the symptoms earlier, questioned the first doctor, chosen another treatment, or taken better care of themselves in general years ago. But shame cannot help you solve the problem in front of you. It traps your attention in a past you cannot change while draining the energy you have for what comes next. So the question that matters now is, what can I do from here? On the opposite side of things, researchers use the term active coping to describe positive responses such as planning, problem solving, seeking useful support, gathering information, taking direct action, and adjusting when circumstances change. Active coping affects whether someone searches for options, communicates symptoms, follows through with difficult care, asks for help, solves practical problems, and adapts when the first plan fails. In one small study, researchers followed 49 people with ALS and examined the coping strategies they used. The participants were divided according to whether they used active coping strategies frequently or less often. The researchers also considered disease severity, the form of ALS, mental health, ventilation and feeding assistance, participation in clinical trials, and gender. And overall, more frequent use of active coping was associated significantly with longer survival. Even though this was a small pilot study, the finding is important because it reflects something seen repeatedly in survival stories. The way a person responds can influence what happens after the crisis begins. Glam demonstrated active coping almost immediately after she was told not to pursue treatment. She didn't know which doctor would help her. She only knew that the first answer was not the one she was ready to accept. So she kept asking. That action led to the next one and then the next. Just like in The Edge, at each moment of failure, whether it was getting lost, dropping the signal flares, or getting injured, the characters employed active coping. They adjusted when the circumstances changed. This coping strategy means that you understand that you play an active role in your health and that you possess enough knowledge, confidence, and skill to participate in that role. Self-efficacy is the belief that you can take meaningful action and manage at least some of what is in front of you. If you have been feeling defeated, I don't want you to leave this episode believing you must suddenly become fearless or force yourself into a battle cry you do not feel. Although, if you decide to try out Charles's "I'm going to kill the bear," I fully support you, and please let me know how you feel afterwards. But rather, I do want you to find the part of yourself that is still willing to take one step towards life. The first thing you can do is name the bear. Ask yourself what currently feels as though it is hunting you or controlling every decision. It may be the diagnosis itself, it may be the prognosis, a frightening symptom, treatment failure, financial pressure, physical weakness, or the belief that you have run out of options. Name the specific thing that you are facing. A clearly defined problem is easier to respond to than a cloud of fear surrounding your entire future. Once you name the bear, you can begin asking what it would take to face it. The second thing to do is choose your survival anchor. Charles's sentence was, "I'm going to kill the bear." And that may be exactly the level of energy you need. Or you might need something a little quieter. "I'm still in this. I'm going to fight. I choose life today. I'm willing to keep looking." Or "It's not over till it's over." Choose a sentence that feels honest enough to believe and strong enough to return you to action. Write it somewhere you will see it. Put it on your bathroom mirror, beside your bed, in your phone, or on the folder you carry to appointments. The purpose is to remind yourself of the decision you've made and about how you will meet each new challenge as it arises. Third, understand that you don't have to know how things things will end up in order to take action today. When Charles says they'll walk out of the wilderness, he doesn't know the route. When Glam requested another opinion, she didn't know whether the next doctor would offer a solution. They began even though they didn't know how the story would end. So ask yourself, what is the next action that moves me towards life? In The Edge, after realizing they had walked several days in a big circle, one of the men began panicking. So Charles sent him to go make a spear to help them catch fish. Making a spear wasn't going to get them out of the wilderness or present all the answers, but rather Charles understood that in that moment of overwhelm, sometimes the best thing to do is take one forward action, something that gives us a sense of agency in a situation that might otherwise feel out of our control. So what is your one small action that you can take today to regain that feeling of agency and move things in the right direction? The next thing to do is to find the people who are willing to look for a way forward with you. Look for practitioners who answer your questions, explain their reasoning, remain curious and open, and help you explore appropriate options rather than treating statistics as a personal verdict. You deserve people who see a unique human being rather than only a prognosis. Your survival team may include your practitioners, family, friends, therapists, faith leaders, support groups, and other survivors. You need people who can hold hope and help you face reality without abandoning possibility. The fifth thing you can do is to borrow belief even when your own is weak. In The Edge, Charles repeatedly says, "What one man can do, another can do." That idea is central to Renegade Remission. There is nothing special about survivors. If they can do it, so can you. What one man can do, another can do. Come back to this podcast to listen to survivor stories, read positive stories and testimonials online or in books, watch documentaries about healing, read case reports and studies. There are thousands of survival stories out there. Fill your thoughts with the best case scenarios instead of the worst. And finally, understand that the decision to live is rarely made only once. You may feel determined today and defeated after the next appointment. You may believe deeply in your body one week and feel betrayed by it the next. This is part of being human. Determining you have the will to survive requires you to make a daily choice. The most important mindset shift you can make after a serious diagnosis is not convincing yourself that you're guaranteed to survive. It's deciding that you will not abandon hope and that even in the face of difficult circumstances, you'll keep trying. If you would like more support between episodes, I'd love to invite you to join my email newsletter. Each week, I share practical healing tools, reflections from the podcast, and encouragement for your healing journey. You can sign up through my website, therenegadenutritionist.com. If this episode helped awaken the part of you that is still ready to fight for your life, follow Renegade Remission and share it with somebody who may need that reminder today. Stay tuned for our next episode, and as always, go be renegades.